at the farthest edge of Dominion-controlled space, where navigation charts degraded into static and even probes refused to return. Something drifted through the void. A ship, human-made, or what was left of it. The cruiser hung in darkness like a broken relic, its one-sprout hull now scorched black and split with ancient fractures. Entire sections were missing, exposing hollow corridors that had once carried thousands. No engines burned, no weapons charged. Only a faint, irregular pulse of emergency power flickered deep within its core, like a dying heartbeat refusing to stop. On every galactic database, humanity was marked as collapsed. Officially extinct. Unofficially irrelevant. And yet here it was. Commander Vale of the Carthan Dominion stood on the bridge of the Vengeance Claw, staring at the drifting wreck through the panoramic viewport. The alien warship loomed behind it like a predator studying a wounded animal. Tactical officers worked quickly, scanning the target with growing confusion. Life sign reading confirmed, one officer reported. 32 biologicals, human origin. A ripple of amusement passed through the bridge. 32. Against a Dominion strike group. Vale's sharp eyes narrowed. Weapon status. Minimal, barely operational. No shield output detected. Another officer chuckled. So this is what the galaxy's terror became. Laughter spread quietly, relieved, almost mocking. The Dominion had feared humanity once. Their archives still spoke of impossible human endurance, of fleets that refused to die, of wars that lasted centuries without surrender. But those were myths now. History written by survivors. Vale stepped forward, claws tapping against polished alloy flooring. Open a channel. A holographic ripple formed in the center of the bridge. A human appeared. Older, weathered. A scar cut through one eyebrow like a permanent reminder of something violent. His uniform was faded, patched in places, but still carried the insignia of Terran Naval Command. Captain Elias Ward. He didn't look afraid. That alone unsettled Vale more than any weapon. This is Captain Elias Ward of the UTS Aegis, the human said calmly. You are entering restricted Terran sovereign space. Alter your course immediately. The bridge erupted in laughter again. Restricted space. Vale leaned closer to the projection. Captain Ward, you have one broken ship and a corpse crew drifting in a forgotten sector. The laughter grew louder. Vale continued coldly. Surrender your vessel, your people will be processed efficiently. The human didn't react. Not even a blink. Instead, there was a long pause, heavy, deliberate. Then Ward spoke softly. You shouldn't be here. Something in his tone shifted the atmosphere instantly. The laughter faded. Vale's eyes narrowed further. Is that a threat? Ward looked down for a fraction of a second, as if listening to something beneath the ship or beneath memory itself. Then he looked back up. No, he said quietly, it's a warning. Vale's patience broke. He lifted a clawed hand. Fire warning shots. Outside, Dominion cannons ignited. Blue-white plasma lanced through space, striking the human ship's hull. Explosions rippled across its surface, tearing away metal plating and venting ancient compartments into vacuum. Systems flickered violently. The Aegis rocked, but it did not retreat. It did not answer. It simply endured. Vale frowned again. Another volley struck. Stronger, closer. Entire sections of the human ship collapsed inward, debris spiraling into space like shattered bone fragments. Still nothing. No distress signal. No surrender. No movement. Then, silence. Every Dominion weapon powered down at once. Confused murmurs spread across the bridge. Commander, we didn't issue a shutdown order. Vale stepped forward sharply. What happened? A technician stared at his console, face draining of color. Energy signature spike inside the human vessel. Another alarm triggered instantly. Unknown systems activating. A third voice shaking now. Cryogenic containment breach detected. Multiple compartments opening across all decks. Vale froze. Cryo, what did you say? The technician swallowed hard. Sir, there are sealed life support pods all over the ship, hundreds, maybe thousands. The human ship suddenly emitted a low-frequency pulse. Not communication. Not distress. A signal buried deep in military encryption, older than any known galactic language. Then Captain Ward's voice returned, calm but changed. He wasn't speaking to them anymore. He was speaking to something inside the ship. All units, Ward said softly, standby override is terminated. A pause. Then he added one final line. Wake up. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. Then every remaining light on the human cruiser turned red. Deep inside its broken hull, something moved. And across Dominion sensors, a new reading appeared. Massive energy signatures. Rising. Expanding. Multiplying. Vale stepped back instinctively. What are we detecting? The technician whispered in horror. Commander, those aren't systems rebooting. A deep metallic sound echoed faintly through space, like 1,000 locks unlocking at once. They're waking up, the drifting human cruiser silence shattered. Not with noise at first, but with pressure. A deep, structural groan echoed through the ship's bones as sealed bulkheads that had not moved in decades finally released their locks. Frost-covered corridors filled with drifting vapor as cryogenic systems lost their grip on suspended life. One by one, the pods opened. Glass-like chambers hissed as thick ice cracked and fell away in heavy sheets. Inside them stood human figures, motionless at first, then violently alive as oxygen flooded their lungs for the first time in years. Some collapsed immediately. Others stayed standing. All of them woke the same way, with eyes that had seen too much war. Captain Elias Ward walked slowly through the awakening corridors of the Aegis, his boots echoing against metal floors coated in frost residue. His expression was not relief. It was guilt. Every chamber he passed held a story humanity was never meant to revisit. A Marine inside one pod slammed his fist against the glass before it fully opened, gasping violently as he fell forward. Another soldier dropped to his knees instantly, gripping his chest as neural recalibration hit his system like a shockwave. The air filled with whispered confusion. How long? Where are we? Did we win? Ward stopped beside a chamber where a young officer slowly stepped out, shaking violently. The man's uniform was older than most current galactic empires. Lieutenant Aris Venn. He looked around the corridor, eyes unfocused. Captain, he rasped, report status of Earth. Ward hesitated. That silence said everything. Venn's expression slowly broke. No, he whispered, no, no, no. Another soldier further down the hall suddenly grabbed Ward's arm. His grip was iron-tight despite the weakness in his body. Tell me we pushed them back, the soldier demanded. Tell me we held the line. Ward didn't answer immediately. Because there was no line anymore. There was no front. There was no Earth. Only memory. The war ended, Ward finally said. Relief flickered across a few faces. Then he finished the sentence. There was no one left to continue it. The corridor went completely silent. Even the ventilation hum felt like it stopped. One Marine laughed once, short, broken, disbelieving. That's not funny, Captain. Ward turned away. I'm not joking. That was when reality hit. One soldier punched the wall hard enough to crack plating. Another simply sank to the floor, staring at his shaking hands like they belonged to someone else. Decades of suspended time collapsed into a single moment of grief. Then came anger. What did they do? Someone growled. Who finished it? Ward closed his eyes for a second. The Carthan Dominion, he said quietly, among others. At that name, something changed in the room. Grief didn't disappear. It sharpened. A Marine stepped forward, slowly tightening the straps of his armor as if muscle memory alone knew what to do. How many ships are outside? He asked. Ward looked at him. A full Dominion strike fleet. The Marine nodded once. Good. Ward turned sharply. Good. The soldier looked up, eyes cold now. Then they're still here. Another soldier activated a weapon rack nearby. Metal clicked. Systems powered on after decades of silence. One by one, others followed. No speeches. No hesitation. Just familiar violence returning like instinct. A veteran officer finally stepped out of his pod last, older than the others. Scars etched into his face from wars that no longer existed in records. He looked at Ward. "We were asleep," he said. Ward nodded, yes. The veteran slowly flexed his fingers. "That means we owe them time." Outside the ship, Dominion scanners suddenly spiked again. Commander Vale's bridge erupted in alarms. Multiple life signs increasing rapidly. Energy signatures stabilizing. "Commander, they're not dying anymore." Vale stared at the readings in disbelief. "What do you mean, not dying?" Then the answer came. The human ship moved. Not drifting. Not damaged. It corrected its position in space, with a sudden, precise burn of engines that had been dead moments before. And its weapon systems began to unfold. Rail cannons rotated outward. Hidden launch bays opened along its hull. Ancient Terran war markings illuminated across its surface like waking scars. Vale stepped back slightly. "They're impossible," he muttered. On the human cruiser, Captain Elias Ward stood at the forward viewport. Below him, an entire army of awakened soldiers waited in silence. One Marine spoke softly. "Orders, Captain." Ward looked at the drifting Dominion fleet ahead. A fleet that had come expecting surrender. A fleet that had just woken something it did not understand. Ward's voice was low. "End transmission protocols." He paused, then added the final command. "Prepare for reactivation." And deep inside the ship, something that had been sleeping for decades finally remembered what it was built to do. War, the silence after awakening, didn't last long. It never did with humans. Inside the Aegis, weapons racks unlocked with mechanical precision as soldiers moved like instinct had taken control of their bodies. Armor sealed, helmets locked, magazines clicked into place with synchronized discipline that didn't need orders, only memory. Captain Elias Ward stood at the bridge viewport, watching the Dominion fleet tighten its formation outside. They were still laughing, still confident, still unaware that something had changed. A tactical officer stepped beside Ward. "Their fleet is deploying assault vectors. They're preparing boarding actions." Ward didn't respond immediately. He was watching the Carthan ships like someone looking at an old scar reopening. "They think we're still asleep," he said quietly. The officer frowned. "Aren't we?" Ward turned slightly. "No." A deep tone echoed through the ship. Not an alarm. A heartbeat. Systems online. Weapons online. Doctrine protocols restored. And then, the Aegis moved. Outside, Commander Vale noticed it instantly. "Target vessel is accelerating," a technician shouted. "No damage fluctuation, full propulsion output restored." Vale leaned forward. "Impossible, that ship was half dead minutes ago." Before anyone could respond, the human cruiser fired. A single railgun shot tore through space. One Dominion frigate vanished instantly. Not disabled. Not breached. Erased. The bridge fell silent. Then chaos erupted. Second ship destroyed. Energy signature matches no known weapon class. "Commander, we're losing formation control." Vale's eyes narrowed sharply. "Return fire." Dominion warships unleashed coordinated plasma barrages across the battlefield. Streams of blue-white fire flooded space, colliding with the human ship's projected shield grid. For a moment, it looked like it would collapse. Then it stabilized and turned red. Inside the Aegis, alarms were quiet now. Controlled. Familiar. A Marine walked past Ward and spoke calmly. "Boarding pods ready." Ward nodded once. "Launch." External hatches opened across the human cruiser. Dozens of small, armored pods shot forward like bullets toward the Dominion fleet. Vale's eyes widened. They're boarding us. An officer screamed. We outnumber them 20-1. Vale snapped, then crushed them before they land. Too late. The pods impacted. Metal screamed across hull plating as human forces breached Dominion cruisers simultaneously across multiple vectors. Inside one ship, Carthan soldiers raised weapons at the sound of tearing metal. The blast doors exploded inward, and the humans came through. No shouting, no warnings, just motion. Precise, efficient, relentless. A Terran Marine stepped through smoke, armor scorched from entry impact, and fired once. 3 Carthans fell instantly. Another human followed, dragging a plasma blade through a corridor so fast it left glowing arcs in the air. Within seconds, the entire hallway was silent. Dead. Elsewhere, similar scenes unfolded across the fleet. Dominion commanders struggled to report anything coherent. They're inside the vessels. We lost Deck 7. Entire boarding defense wiped out in under 30 seconds. Vale clenched his claws. Focus fire on the human ship. But something was wrong. The Aegis wasn't retreating. It was advancing. Captain Ward stood still as tactical displays filled with collapsing Dominion formations. He wasn't surprised. He was remembering. Sir, a young officer said nervously, their fleet is breaking formation. Ward nodded slightly. That's what happens when they realize they're already inside the kill zone. Outside, Dominion ships attempted to regroup, but the human boarding teams had already begun sabotage operations inside them. One after another, enemy vessels began going dark. Then exploding. Vale's hands tightened on his command throne. Pull back, reform perimeter. But panic was already spreading through the Dominion fleet. Because reports were no longer about losses. They were about fear. They're not just fighting us. They're adapting in real time. Commander, they're predicting our movements. Inside one captured Dominion cruiser, a Carthan officer watched a human soldier step through smoke, alone, into the command center. The alien raised his weapon. The human didn't stop walking. The officer fired. The bullets hit the soldier and stopped. Armor systems flared. Energy absorbed. The human kept walking. The officer dropped his weapon. Impossible, he whispered. The Terran stopped in front of him, looked down, and spoke one word. War. Then the corridor went dark. Back on the Aegis, Captain Ward finally spoke again. Status. A technician answered shakily. 3 Dominion cruisers disabled, 2 destroyed, boarding teams active across 12 ships. Ward nodded, then added quietly, Begin Phase 2. On the Dominion flagship bridge, Vale froze. Phase 2. A distant alarm echoed across every channel. From inside captured ships, something began powering up. Not human weapons. Dominion systems. Turned against their own fleet. Vale's eyes widened in realization. They're using our ships. And for the first time since the battle began, Commander Vale felt something unfamiliar crawl up his spine. Not anger. Not command. Fear. Because the humans weren't defending. They were dismantling an empire. System by system. Ship by ship. And this was only the beginning. The Dominion flagship, Vengeance Claw, trembled under the weight of collapsing battle reports. Holographic displays flickered red across the bridge. Entire cruisers were going dark. Not destroyed. Captured. Then turned. Commander Vale stood motionless, claws clenched so tightly the metal armrest beneath him began to crack. Around him, officers shouted conflicting reports, but none of it mattered anymore. The pattern was clear. The humans were not losing. They were erasing. A technician swallowed hard. Commander, we've lost contact with 12 ships. Their weapon systems are now firing on us. Vale's voice dropped dangerously. That's impossible. Then the bridge doors exploded inward. Not breached. Not cut. Just torn apart from the outside. Smoke rolled into the command center like a living thing. Silence followed. Then footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Deliberate. A figure stepped through the smoke. Human. Armored. Scarred. The Dominion officers raised weapons instantly, but something about the man made them hesitate. He didn't move like a soldier. He moved like a conclusion. Colonel Nathan Hale. Vale had seen his file. Everyone had. But files didn't carry weight. Reality did. And reality now stood in his bridge. A young officer fired first. The shot hit Hale square in the chest. The energy burst exploded. And did nothing. Not even a stagger. Hale looked down at the smoking impact mark on his armor. Then back up. Is that all? He asked quietly. Panic erupted instantly. Every weapon on the bridge opened fire. Plasma rail burst, shock charges. The air turned into a storm of light. And still, Hale walked forward. Step, step, step. One Dominion soldier tried to run. Hale grabbed him mid-motion and slammed him into the console hard enough to fracture steel. Another raised a blade. Hale caught the wrist. Twist. Snap. Silence. Commander Vale finally drew his own weapon, forcing himself forward. You are outnumbered, human. Hale paused. Looked at him. For the first time, Vale felt it clearly. Not hatred. Not rage. Something far worse. Control. You think numbers matter, Hale said calmly. Vale charged. The plasma blade ignited. He struck. Hale caught it barehanded. The blade screamed against reinforced Terran armor, melting the air around it. Then it stopped. Vale froze. Impossible. No biological tissue should survive that contact. Hale tightened his grip. The blade shattered like glass. Vale staggered backward. For the first time in his life, he had no answer. Hale stepped closer. Tell me, he said quietly, do you know what happened at Vega Prime? Vale hesitated. Your fleet was destroyed there, he said carefully. You were wiped out. Hale's eyes darkened slightly. Almost. A silence fell over the bridge. Even the alarm seemed quieter. Hale continued. We didn't lose Vega Prime. He looked around at the terrified bridge crew. We learned from it. Outside the flagship, Dominion ships were still falling, one after another, as human boarding teams turned entire fleets against themselves. But inside the bridge, something far more dangerous was happening. The center of command was collapsing. Vale backed away slowly. You're just one man. Hale tilted his head slightly. No, he corrected. Then he tapped his helmet comm once. And every Terran boarding channel across the battlefield responded instantly. Hundreds of voices answered. Not chaotic. Not fragmented. Unified. Yes, Colonel. Vale's blood ran cold. Hale wasn't alone. He never had been. The Dominion fleet outside began to realize it too. Because across captured ships, human soldiers were no longer just fighting. They were coordinating. Every Dominion maneuver was being predicted. Every counterattack neutralized before it began. It wasn't a battle anymore. It was execution. A tactical officer on Vale's bridge screamed suddenly. Commander, boarding breach on Deck 1. Another shouted, they're in command corridors. Vale spun, seal it. But the doors were already shaking. From the outside, something heavy slammed once. Twice. Then stopped. Silence. Vale backed toward the tactical console. We still have the fleet. Hale cut him off. No, he said simply. And for the first time, Vale looked at the battlefield outside. Really looked. Dozens of Dominion ships already dark. others firing on each other. Entire formations collapsing into confusion. And at the center of it all, the human ship advancing like a predator that had already decided the outcome. Vale whispered, "What are you?" Hale stepped forward one final time. "Your mistake," he said. Then the bridge doors opened, and the humans entered. The battlefield did not fall silent because the fighting stopped. It fell silent because something larger arrived. Space itself seemed to dim. At the edge of the system, a shadow unfolded across starlight, vast enough to swallow entire fleets without firing a shot. Sensors across every Dominion vessel screamed in overload as a single object translated into real space. The Oblivion Crown, a Titan-class warship, older than most empires, heavier than continents, built not to win battles, but to erase civilizations. On the Vengeance Claw, Commander Vale froze as the tactical display reconfigured itself automatically, trying to comprehend the scale of the newcomer. Then it failed. Multiple systems simply shut down in refusal. "Report," Vale snapped. A technician's voice trembled. "Commander, Titan-class signature confirmed." Another officer whispered, "That ship, it's a world killer." Across the battlefield, even human boarding teams paused for a fraction of a second. Captain Elias Ward stood on the Aegis Bridge, watching the horizon of space distort around the incoming vessel. His expression changed. Not fear. Recognition. "That thing," a Marine said quietly, "that's what ended the inner colonies, isn't it?" Ward didn't answer immediately. Then he said, "Worse." On Dominion channels, High Executor Sarvak's voice spread across every fleet in cold authority. "All forces converge. Human threat is now secondary. The Titan will cleanse the sector." Vale turned sharply. "They're calling it in." A strategist nodded grimly. "It's not reinforcement, it's termination protocol." The Oblivion Crown began to glow. Slowly at first, then brighter. Energy buildup across its core was visible even to unaided eyes, a growing star forming inside metal. Ward's tactical display flashed red warnings instantly. "Planetary-scale weapon charging," an officer said. "Impact yield extinction level." A Marine muttered, "That's not a ship." "That's an execution." Inside captured Dominion vessels, human soldiers stopped firing for a moment. Not because they were losing, but because they felt it too. Something too large to ignore. On the Vengeance Claw, Vale clenched his claws. "We destroy the humans first, then the Titan." But even as he spoke, reports continued to collapse. "We've lost control of 6 more ships. Human forces are redirecting our weapon systems. They're using our fleet against itself." Vale slammed the console. "Ignore them." Then the Titan fired. Not fully. Just a test pulse. A single beam of white energy lanced across space, vaporizing everything in its path. One Dominion cruiser, then another, then a fractured asteroid field. Gone. No explosion. No debris. Just absence. The silence that followed was worse than destruction. Ward's voice came through Aegis command channels, low and controlled. "All human vessels fall back from the firing vector." A Marine looked at him sharply. "Captain, what are you doing?" Ward didn't take his eyes off the Titan. "Surviving," he said. Then something unexpected happened. A secondary signal appeared across Terran networks. Encrypted. Old. Extremely old. Ward's eyes widened slightly as the system auto-decoded it. One word appeared on every screen. "Revenant." The ship shuddered. Deep within its core, dormant systems that had not been accessed in decades began to respond. A technician stepped back. "Captain, that's not part of standard protocol." Ward's expression hardened. "I know." Outside, Vale noticed the shift immediately. "The human ship is changing again," he said. "What now?" an officer asked. Then the Aegis began to unfold hidden sections along its hull. Armor plates rotated. Weapon arrays expanded. Engines shifted configuration. Not repairs. Transformation. On a separate channel, Colonel Nathan Hale's voice returned. Calm. Cold. Revenant protocol initiated. Vale frowned. What is that? A Dominion analyst went pale. Commander, I think it's a last resort Terran doctrine. For what? The analyst hesitated. For killing Titans. Vale went still. Across space, the Aegis ignited its secondary core. Energy signatures spiked violently, far beyond anything seen before from a cruiser-class vessel. Ward's voice came over comms again, quieter now. To all remaining humans, he said, this is not survival anymore. A pause. This is repayment. The human fleet began regrouping instantly. Captured Dominion ships were abandoned or redirected. All focus shifted toward the Titan. Even Vale realized it now. The humans had stopped reacting to the battlefield. They had chosen the center of it. The Oblivion Crown continued charging, unaware or unconcerned. Sarvek's voice echoed across Dominion space once more. Eradication will proceed in 30 seconds. Ward looked at the approaching nightmare, then spoke one final command. Bring it down. And every human ship in the system turned toward the Titan-class warship at once. For the first time in the battle, the galaxy understood what was coming next. Not defense, not retreat, but war against extinction itself. Space around the Titan stopped feeling empty. It felt crowded. At first, Dominion sensors thought it was interference, ghost echoes from destroyed ships, fragments of debris forming false readings. But then the signatures stabilized. Too many. Too organized. Too human. From the dark edges of the system, something impossible began to emerge. Ship after ship. Silent. Ancient. Buried in cloak fields, asteroid graves, and forgotten deep space corridors. Human warships. Not a few. Hundreds. Then thousands. Commander Vale stared at the tactical display as it struggled to update in real time. No, that's not possible, he whispered. A technician's hands shook. Commander, those signatures, they match pre-collapse Terran naval registry. Vale turned sharply. You're telling me they were here the whole time. Before anyone could answer, a new transmission flooded every Dominion channel. A calm human voice. Older. Confident. I told you, it said, we were still here. The voice belonged to Admiral Marcus Kane. And then the void lit up. The hidden human fleet activated in full formation, engines igniting like stars being born in reverse. Massive carriers unfolded from stealth positions. Battleships longer than cities rotated into firing lines. The galaxy had not seen them, because they had never stopped watching. On the Aegis, Captain Elias Ward stood frozen, as scans updated continuously. Where did they all come from? A Marine asked. Ward's voice was quiet. They didn't come from anywhere. He looked at the screen. They were waiting. Outside, Dominion commanders began panicking. This is a trap. Human reinforcements detected across all vectors. Impossible fleet density. How did they hide this many ships? Vale slammed his clawed fist onto the console. Engage them, all ships fire. But the Dominion fleet was already breaking. Because something worse than the fleet had arrived. The Valkyrie. A massive Terran warship emerged from cloaked space like a broken god returning to judgment. Its hull was scarred, ancient, and impossibly large, far beyond standard classification. Even Vale felt something shift in his instincts. Fear. Pure instinctive fear. On an open channel, Admiral Kane's voice spread across the battlefield. Dominion forces, he said calmly, you have two options. A pause. Run. Another pause. Or be remembered. The human fleet moved as one. Not chaotic. Not desperate. Perfect coordination. Every ship locked onto targets with terrifying precision. Then the first volley fired. Space ignited. Dominion ships vanished in synchronized explosions. Entire squadrons erased before they could even return fire. Vale shouted, "Reform perimeter." But there was no perimeter anymore. The humans had encircled everything. On the Aegis, Ward watched the battlefield unfold like a storm finally breaking. A Marine beside him whispered, "We were asleep for 30 years. How did they build all this?" Ward didn't answer immediately. Then he said, "They didn't build it." He looked at the fleet. They prepared it. Meanwhile, inside the Dominion flagship, Sarvek's composure finally cracked. "We are the Dominion," he snarled. "We are not hunted." But even as he spoke, alarms overwhelmed the bridge. Fleet losses exceeding 40%. Human boarding teams inside 12 capital ships. "They are taking control of our command network." Vale turned slowly toward the viewport and saw it. Human ships weren't just fighting. They were rewriting the battlefield. Captured Dominion vessels were turning against their own formation mid-combat, firing from inside their lines. Entire fleets were collapsing under their own weapons. It wasn't war anymore. It was dismantling. Then something changed. A deep vibration echoed through space. The Titan, the Oblivion Crown, finished its charge. Its core glowed brighter than any star nearby. Sarvek's voice returned, triumphant now. Extinction protocol initiated. A beam of pure annihilation began forming. Admiral Kane saw it instantly. "All ships," he said calmly, "hold formation." Vale blinked. "They're not moving." The analyst answered in horror. "They're waiting for impact." Vale's eyes widened. "They're letting it fire." On the Aegis, Ward clenched his fists. "Colonel Hale," he said, "what are they doing?" Hale's voice came back cold. "Proving a point." The Titan fired. A beam of pure white destruction tore across space, directly toward the human fleet. For one moment, everything vanished inside light. Dominion observers thought it was over. Then the light broke, and the human fleet was still there. But something else had changed. Every human ship now glowed faintly red. Reactor systems overclocked. Weapons fully primed. Admiral Kane's voice returned. "Now," he said quietly, and the entire human fleet surged forward. Straight into the Titan's shadow. Straight into the heart of the war. And Vale finally understood. This was no longer defense. This was judgment. The human fleet did not hesitate. Not even after surviving the Titan's first strike. Instead, they accelerated straight into it. Space around the Oblivion Crown twisted as thousands of Terran warships converged on the massive vessel. Its outer armor, thick enough to withstand supernova debris, began lighting up with impacts from coordinated human fire. But they weren't trying to destroy it from outside. They were going in. On the Valkyrie, Admiral Marcus Kane stood at the forward command pit, watching the breach point widen in the Titan's outer hull. "Boarding corridors open," a technician reported. Kane nodded once. "Begin insertion." Across the fleet, human assault pods launched in synchronized waves. They slammed into the Titan's surface like meteors and vanished inside. Inside the Oblivion Crown, alarms blared across every deck. Not for damage, but for intrusion. Breach DATACTAD, internal sector 12. Boarding UNITS inside hull structure. High Executor Sarvek stood in disbelief as tactical maps filled with red intrusion markers. "That is impossible," he hissed. "No force breaches a Titan internally." Then the reports worsened. "They're bypassing outer defenses. They're moving through maintenance corridors. They know the layout." Sarvek turned sharply. "How do they know the layout?" On a distant channel, Commander Vale watched the chaos unfold, his confidence finally cracking. "They've studied this ship," he whispered, "for years." Inside the Titan, darkness swallowed everything. Then light returned in bursts of gunfire. Terran Marines moved through narrow industrial corridors carved for machines the size of buildings. Every step echoed like judgment. Dominion defenders fired desperately. But the humans didn't stop. They adapted instantly, flanking, breaching, rerouting power grids mid-fight. It wasn't combat. It was navigation through a living structure. Captain Elias Ward's voice came through internal comms. "All squads report status." A Marine responded immediately. "We're in. Resistance heavier than expected but collapsing." Another voice cut in. "We've reached internal transport core." Then a third, quieter voice. "We found something." Silence followed. Ward's expression tightened. "Report." A pause. Then, "There are human prisoners here." The bridge of the Aegis went silent. Even Colonel Hale's eyes sharpened slightly. Ward stepped forward. "Explain." The Marine's voice trembled slightly for the first time. "They're alive, Captain. Hundreds, maybe more, kept in containment cells." Another voice joined. "They're not soldiers." A longer pause. "They're survivors." On the Valkyrie, Kane closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again. "Change of priority," he said calmly. "Extract them." Inside the Titan, the battle changed instantly. Human forces no longer advanced purely toward the reactor core. They began breaking into containment sectors. Corridors filled with chaos as Dominion guards tried to stop them, but it was already too late. One Terran Marine smashed through a reinforced door and froze. Inside were rows of broken human figures. Starved, weak, chained, but alive. The Marine's voice cracked over comms. "Contact made, civilians confirmed." A soft whisper from inside one cell. "Humans." The Marine dropped his weapon. For a moment, the war stopped for him. Then alarms screamed again as Dominion reinforcements arrived. He lifted his rifle again, but slower this time. Angry Earth. Elsewhere in the Titan, Admiral Kane led his strike team deeper. Explosions echoed around them as they pushed toward the reactor core. A young officer beside him spoke quietly. "Admiral, we're losing time. Reactor instability increasing." Kane didn't slow down. "I know." Another explosion shook the corridor. The Titan itself was beginning to react internally, security systems activating in layers, sealing entire sections to contain the breach. But humans were already inside too deep, too coordinated, too determined. On Dominion bridge feeds, Sarvak watched in growing horror. "They're not just attacking," he muttered. "They're dismantling us from within." Vale finally spoke, voice tense. "Order evacuation of internal systems, collapse the corridors." But the analyst shook his head. "Too late, Commander. They're already in the core network." Inside the Titan's central nervous system, human hackers had breached command architecture. Systems began flipping. Doors opening for Terrans. Traps disabling. Weapons rerouting. The ship itself was being turned against its own crew. Then Kane's team reached the final corridor. Massive reactor doors stood ahead, pulsing with unstable light. And behind them, the heart of the Oblivion Crown. A voice echoed across all internal channels. "Intruders DATCTD, termination imminent." The doors began to open. Kane raised his weapon slightly. "Remember this," he said calmly. "We don't lose here." The doors fully opened. Blinding light poured out, and the final descent into the Titan began. The reactor core of the Oblivion Crown was not a room. It was a sun held in chains. Light screamed through armored containment fields, bending metal and shadow alike. Every surface around Admiral Marcus Kane's strike team pulsed with unbearable heat as reality itself seemed stretched thin. The moment they stepped inside, alarms stopped sounding. Not because they were silenced, because the system had stopped believing it could survive. Dominion engineers stood frozen behind reinforced barriers, watching the impossible unfold. Humans walking directly into the heart of a Titan-class warship like it was just another battlefield. High Executor Sarvek's voice cracked across internal comms. "Seal the core, seal it now." But the ship no longer obeyed him. It obeyed them. Inside the network, Terran infiltration had already rewritten command pathways. Entire defense grids flickered, then reoriented, pointing inward. At the human's command, Vale, still aboard the Vengeance Claw, stared at the collapsing tactical map. "They've taken the core," he whispered. An officer replied shakily, "Commander, the Titan is being turned off from the inside." But Vale knew better. "No," he said slowly. "They're waking it up." Inside the reactor chamber, Kane advanced step by step through burning light. His armor smoked at the edges. His team followed in silence, each soldier moving like they already understood they would not be leaving. Ahead of them stood the central control spine of the Oblivion Crown, a massive structure of rotating containment rings surrounding a singularity core. And inside that core, something pulsed. Alive. The Dominion engineers finally opened fire. Plasma bolts streaked through the chamber. One Terran soldier was hit and thrown backward, but even as he fell, he fired once. The engineer collapsed. Another attempted to trigger a meltdown override. A human sniper eliminated him instantly through layered shielding. Kane didn't stop walking. He stepped over burning debris and spoke softly into comms. "Evacuation status." Captain Ilias Ward's voice answered immediately. "Civilian pods secured, extraction ongoing." A pause. Then Ward added, quieter, "We're losing time, Marcus." Kane looked up at the core. "I know." Behind him, Dominion forces surged into the chamber. Elite guards, desperate now, firing everything they had. But the humans were already forming a line. Not defensive. Final. Colonel Nathan Hale appeared at Kane's side through a secondary breach, stepping through smoke like a ghost of older wars. He looked at the reactor, then at Kane. "This ends now," Hale said. Kane nodded once. "Yes." On Dominion channels, Sarvek screamed orders across collapsing fleets. Stop them before." But the transmission cut mid-sentence, because every screen across the Titan suddenly changed. A human symbol appeared across all systems. Then a message. "Revenant authority accepted." Vale felt his blood run cold. "That's not a weapon system," he whispered. "That's control." Inside the core, Kane reached the central command interface. His hand hovered for a moment, then pressed down, and the Titan obeyed. The Oblivion Crown began to shift. Not explode. Not fire. Transform. Its internal systems reversed polarity. Containment fields inverted. Energy channels redirected. Sarvek's voice broke across emergency comms. "What are you doing to my ship?" Kane answered calmly, "Taking it back." The reactor began collapsing inward, but not as destruction. As containment. The Singularity Core stabilized under human override protocols, locking into a controlled state. A weapon, becoming a prison. Outside, Dominion fleets watching the Titan froze in disbelief. "It's not firing. It's shutting down." "No, look at the energy flow." The Titan was no longer an executioner. It was being rewritten. Vale finally understood the horror. "They didn't destroy it," he whispered. "They captured it." Inside the core chamber, Sarvek made one final attempt to trigger emergency annihilation protocols. But nothing responded. Not a single system obeyed him anymore. Then Kane spoke one last time. "You built a weapon to erase us," he said. He looked at the dying light of the singularity. "So we built a way to keep it." A pause. Then, alive. The reactor stabilized. The Titan went silent. Across the battlefield, Dominion ships began retreating instantly. Not ordered. Not organized. Just fleeing. Because something had shifted in the galaxy. Humanity was no longer a hunted species. It was a controlling force. On the Aegis, Ward watched the final system reports stabilize. The Titan is contained, a technician whispered. Another added, all hostile fleets retreating. Ward closed his eyes for a moment. Not relief. Understanding. Because he knew what came next. Colonel Hale's voice returned quietly. This isn't over, he said. Ward nodded slowly. I know. Far beyond the battlefield, across fractured star systems and burning wreckage fields, one truth spread faster than any weapon ever could. The humans had not returned to survive. They had returned to reclaim everything. And now, the galaxy remembered why it once feared their silence.